a few agenda items, and essentially this is going to be kind of a two-part presentation. The first part, I'm going to go through some items that I think are extremely critical and important. The second part of the presentation is going to involve a panel. And Kevin, thank you in advance, so you can just stay seated for just a little while. Godfrey, if you want to hang out for just a few minutes until I get done with this first part. Hey, so NTTA, the agenda was basically kind of introduce NTTA. Hey, you know those guys. So I'm actually going to skip the first couple of slides there because you already know quite well who NTTA is. I do want to kind of talk about the stages of business planning. I brought this up at the last conference. I may have brought it up at the conference before that. It's just, I can't hammer this home enough. I mean, it's absolutely critical that you understand there's certain things you need to think through and plan in the way of, running your company or starting your company. So I want to talk about that. And then I'm going to end my presentation, and then we're going to have a panelist talk about sustainability. Okay. So with that, here we go. All right. I'm going to skip that one. You know who NTTA is. Stages of business planning. You guys have already done a lot of this. These are general concepts. Okay. So you have, develop your vision. Well, what is that? I have a couple of slides on that. Talk to the experts. Everybody, so far you've been told numerous times about, hey, please go pull somebody, go pull an NTTA member, go talk to a vendor, go talk to a consultant in the room, go talk to an engineer in the room. So talk to the experts. That's going to be absolutely critical. The financial analysis, we can't forget that. That's going to test the viability of whether your network is going to be sustainable into the future. Okay. And then the feasibility analysis. I mean, that's something that has to be done in the early stages of business planning. Okay. All right. So as far as your vision, hey, do you want to go solo? Hey, let me take a hand count here. So how many tribes in this room have already applied for grant funding and received grant funding from the last couple of years? All right, there's a lot of tribes that have. Now, how many tribes in the room are getting ready to apply for grant funding in the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program in the second round? All right, equally the same number of folks. Hey, that's important. So for all of you guys, I mean, do you want to go solo? Do you want to do this? Do you want to exercise self-determination on your own? That's the riskiest, but probably the most rewarding, arguably the most rewarding. Partnering. I know there's a lot of tribes in this room that are partnering with other folks. Okay. So, you want to partner with somebody else. I think that's pretty appealing to a lot of tribes who are going after grant funding. And then subsequent to that, building out those networks. Wireline versus wireless. There's a decision that has to be made there. But once again, these are just kind of concepts that if you haven't already thought about, you're going to need to think about. And then long-term goals for your community. If you want a sustainable network into the future, the buzzword in this conference and pretty much industry-wide is fiber. However, there's, robust fixed wireless alternatives and solutions that are just unbelievable. So just something that you have to think about. Engineers, equipment vendors, consultants, and attorneys. There's all of those in this room and around the room and in the vendor room. So please visit those guys. Ask a lot of questions. Please ask a lot of questions. I mean, that's what we're here for. Okay. Financial analysis. As I mentioned, this has to be performed early in the process. There's no way that you can really tell if you're going to have a viable business into the future without this process. You need a financial projection, and that's going to consist of a complete set of financial statements, a balance sheet, an income statement, a statement of cash flows. Those financial statements are going to tell you whether or not you're going to be losing cash on an annual basis, whether you're going to be flush financially into the future, whether you're going to be bankrupt within 2 years. So please, early in the process, when you're first starting to get into this process and think about building your own network, please do a financial analysis. And there's a lot of folks in this room that can help with that. Okay. So, please pull me aside or pull Rob aside, pull others aside, other consultants in the room to talk about this. It's absolutely critical. A 5 to 10 year forecast, generally that's going to kind of get the job done. That's going to give you a flavor of where things are going to turn out. Okay. So we recommend a 5 to 10 year forecast to kind of see where things are going to be headed down the road. So you're going to want to do that. And then there's going to be a lot of criteria that will kind of guide you during the planning process. And once again, that's going to fall back on just decision makers in your community, talking to the right people, running the analysis, that type of thing. Okay, so this is going to be the meat of this presentation. So last summer, I had the privilege of actually writing a white paper and on behalf of NTTA, and we talked about sustainability funding. So everything that you've heard so far has to do with, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program or BEAD funding, or like Brian just talked about, the various loan and grant programs, that type of thing. One thing that, it's kind of lurking back there. It absolutely has to be considered. It's the most critical piece of all of this. You have to be able to sustain the networks into the future. They have to remain viable for future generations. Okay, so essentially what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides before I bring Kevin up and ask Godfrey some questions is, hey, what is this sustainability stuff we're talking about? What's infrastructure versus sustaining or operating or maintaining the network? Kind of going to get a slide into that. Pricing a broadband service. I'm going to give a couple of examples here that's, it's I don't know if it's mind-boggling. I think yesterday I said it's going to blow your mind. Well, I don't know if it's going to blow your mind, but it's an eye-opener. And then, affordability and high cost. I always like to quote some of our friends at the GAO. Rebecca, Keith, thank you. And there's a direct correlation between affordability and high cost and the pricing of broadband service. So, all right, so what is this sustainability? In the broadest sense, it's essentially sustainability refers to the ability to maintain or support a process over time. In the context of deploying voice and broadband networks while establishing affordable pricing for your community members. Okay, sustainability refers to maintaining and keeping those networks viable for future generations. Okay, so this isn't a one and done. This isn't you get a grant and you go out and build a network and now you're off and running. This is not it. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the opposite. Once you build that network, then you have to maintain it, and that's where the real work comes in. I'm going to refer to infrastructure. All the grant funding, it pays for what I'm going to call capital expenditures, or I'm going to call it CapEx. Okay? Sustaining the network into the future has to do with operating expenses, and essentially I'm going to call that OpEx. Okay? So almost 100% of all federally designated or appropriated grant funding is to be used for building networks. And Brian mentioned that same thing. So essentially what you have, if you go in for 100% grant, Brian mentioned not only might there be some matching funds, but one other thing that you need to think about is that about 98% of that grant is going to be mandatory to use that for building networks. Okay, there's essentially a 2% kind of ancillary amount that you can use for overheads and that type of thing, for planning and that type of thing, paying consultants and engineers, to actually put the feasibility study together. Okay, but 98% of the grant amount, that's going to go toward CapEx. Okay, OpEx, what are these type of things? These are things like your annual labor and benefits, vehicle costs, office supplies, computer systems, tools, cultural clearances, things like that. I gave a presentation yesterday and I talked about employee considerations, and essentially the types of employees that you need to think about. You got to have IT type people. You probably need some type of central office technicians, outside plant technicians, combination techs. You need customer service representatives. You need a general manager. You need an accounting group or team. You might need an HR person, human resources person, right? So this isn't something where you build a network and, you kind of throw a few people at it and just hope for the best in the future. This requires a lot of methodical, thinking into the future about what types of positions are you going to need to hire. Those are the type of things that are actually going to sustain that network into the future, okay, the labor benefits, etc. All right, so it's broken down into two parts. I actually just kind of covered that. The CapEx is going to be your plant. fiber, central office equipment, fixed wireless equipment, that type of thing. And then the OpEx, I cover that in the last slide. So one thing that, I'll just get to that slide. There's a formula. And the formula kind of looks like this. And essentially what you have your plant and it's going to depreciate over time. So even if you get a brand new network today, it's going to depreciate over time. And 20 years from now, guess what? You're probably not going to get another grant to replace the plant that you bought with this first grant, right? So you're going to need to do a lot of planning and setting aside funds for future generations, for future networks. Okay, so that's one thing that you really need to think through. But the formula looks like this. So you got plant, less accumulated depreciation because it's going to depreciate over time. And that's going to give you, in the rate of return regulated world, that's going to give you what's called net rate base. So capital infrastructure is investment, which is net rate base. That's what goes into rates. Okay, here's what ends up happening. Here's how this works, guys. You take your net plant and you take it times the rate of return. Think about a mutual fund. Okay, when you put money into a mutual fund, you're hoping for a rate of return on that mutual fund, right? You're hoping to get 10%, 15%, or higher. Okay, well, that's what happens in a rate of return regulated world. And specifically, that's what happens for broadband pricing. You don't take a $20 million grant and then you plug the whole amount into broadband pricing right off the bat. That plant's going to be good for 20 years. So you essentially take the rate of return on that plant. That's what goes into the price. However, your annual operating expenses, that happens every year, and it's recurring every year and every year and every year. Okay? So the rate of return on regulated rate base, that's a much, much smaller amount than the annual operating expenses that consist of labor and benefits and those type of things. Okay? So the other part of that is that you need a certain amount of revenue to actually cover that annual operating cost. Okay, this is where, hey, it's either going to break the bank, you're going to go bankrupt, or you're going to be viable into the future. So you have to generate enough revenue to cover the amount of annual operating costs. Okay, so here's what's a little bit mind-boggling. In the research that I did last year, and I spent a ton of time doing this on behalf of NTTA, and I have a white paper, and I think we have a web link that, and I'm happy to share all of that. NTTA is absolutely happy to share this. The return on rate base, when you think about, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The first example is, let's say you have a $100 broadband service. Okay, hypothetical, $100. $15 of that service is going to be attributable to the return on rate base. Okay, the return on rate base is applied to your grant, ultimately to your grant. The grant funding, you're going to buy the plant, you're going to depreciate it, you get a rate of return. 15% of that price. So $85 of a $100 broadband service is attributable to operating expenses on an annual basis. So while we are in a life-changing world where it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, right? You got to remember that 85 cents on the dollar, that is something that you're going to have to plan for into the future. So so Godfrey and I, NTTA, we have been actively involved in trying to get the word out from an advocacy perspective that, hey, you know what? We don't want to set tribes up for failure. That would be the absolute worst thing that could happen. So we've been advocating for some time, and we're going to continue to advocate for sustainability funding, so that tribes, whenever you have to fund your broadband service into the future, if you have a pool of money to basically to dig into, okay, that can help offset your high cost of providing that service, make the service affordable for your customers. Otherwise, you're going to see this in the next slide. So I took over time. We took this is probably, I think we used like maybe 2021 financial data. We took NTTA members' cost data. Okay, and we said, okay, so on tribal lands, if you broke down a per connection or per location amount, how much is it going to cost to serve tribal lands, one location annually on tribal lands? Okay, And the answer is, according to this and the research that I did, and it's all public data, about $2,600. So divide that by 12, okay? And on a monthly basis, you're going to be spending, it's going to cost you, you're not going to be spending, it's going to cost you $225 on average, nationwide. This is all nationwide data. $225 per customer per month just to provide the service. So how many customers in your communities can afford $225 per month? Okay, that's not going to happen. If you take that again, you take $2,600 times 85%, that's going to get you somewhere around $1,700 or $1,800 per year. Okay, that's just the OpEx. Okay, that's the amount of sustainability funding that would help offset and keep those rates affordable. Now, on non-tribal lands, also did the research, compare that. It's about $1,600 per connection per year. So on an annual basis, it's about $1,000 more per connection to serve community members on tribal lands versus non-tribal lands. Okay, so that's eye-opening. We need your help. And what I'm saying is that we're going to continue advocating for this stuff. Okay, and I mean, it's absolutely critical. I mean, that's the mission of NTTA. But if you have an opportunity to help us, we would appreciate it. Okay, there is, I think these slides are available, right, Sonia? Okay, so there's a web link to the white paper that I wrote on behalf of NTTA, and it goes through and makes the business case, and it goes through a lot of pages that basically shows how all of this works, and it breaks it all down. Okay, so you can have that. Kevin, could you come up, please?
Test. All right. Hey, Kevin. Hey, this guy's a funny guy. But again, just to recap what Doug was talking about, it's like you gave me money to buy a brand new F-150 truck, but you gave me no gas money, and I don't have a driver's license to drive it. I mean, that's where we're at today. The easiest way to say it. I don't have a driver's license to drive that truck, and I have no gas money. So what do I do with this brand new, shiny new truck? So it's going to sit there? Is it going to just be a monument to that we built something great, but we can't use it? So that's what we're talking about, is where do I get the gas money? Where do I get a license? Where do I get people to teach my kids how to drive this brand new truck? How do I get a driver's license for it? That's where we're at today. I mean, to put it in the easiest terms, that's what we have to do and try to figure out what to do today, is get the gas money and get a driver's license to drive this car. So we're looking at personnel, workforce development. We're looking at sustainability funding. Hopefully we can get some from somewhere. We, as ILECs, independent local exchange carriers, we get funding from a fund called USF, Universal Service Funds. USAC's going to talk about that here a little bit later. But that's going to be a key factor in what and how you're going to be able to drive this truck and get the funding you need. That might be one way. Another way might be through the state process. So those are some things we're looking at. I know we're short on time, so I better get things started here. So, all right, Doug.
All right, Godfrey, thank you. Hey, so I'm going to ask Godfrey and Kevin, I want to get a couple of different perspectives as it relates to sustainability, how helpful that would be for their community. So I'm going to ask each one of them a couple of questions. Godfrey, I'll start with you. Sorry, this first one's a little long-winded. So without ETC designation, we've heard that this morning, ETC, internet service providers cannot apply to receive funding from the Universal Service Fund. Yet tribal lands experience the lowest broadband availability, arguably because of the lack of funding available to operate networks. Please give us your take on how sustainability funding would promote broadband availability on tribal lands.
Well, obviously, it's all this infrastructure money we're getting, $3 billion that's being given out today. Of that $3 billion, how many of these companies are going to go under? I know we had to put in our grant applications how we're going to sustain this. But can a tribe really sustain a brand new department? Say like the tribe has 48 departments doing stuff with housing, sewer, all these other things. They're spending all that money there. Now we have to build a brand new department to try to do this. And where's the money going to come from that? Does the tribal coffers have enough money to be able to do that? That's going to be some questions that everybody has to start trying to figure out. So let's just say we start building this new company and we have some 600 subscribers. Is that going to be enough money to be able to maintain that new truck? Is that going to be able to have enough personnel to do that? These are some of the questions that we need to start trying to figure out right now. I do not want any country to get a black eye by saying they gave us all this money, but you guys squander it. Well, shoot, you didn't give us any kind of a plan. There was no plan when we got this funding. It rolled out so fast. Here's the money. Now you figure it out. And that's where NTTA comes in. We're here today to help you through that process. We want to make sure everybody gets through this. So hopefully that answers that.
It does, Godfrey. Thank you. Next question is for Kevin. So Kevin, within the Federal Communications Commission, the record is clear that it costs more to serve tribal lands in general than any other areas of the United States. How would sustainability funding help the Pueblo of Jemez community promote broadband and make broadband service more affordable for your members?
Thank you. So for the Pueblo of Jemez, we have a tribal population of just around 4,000. And so we live in one village. So our network that we've set up serves that. And prior to the pandemic, we had one service provider, Windstream, that provided phone service. And less than 10% of the homes had internet connection in the homes. And when we did a survey, when the pandemic hit, roughly a little over 45% had secured internet connection, but majority were using their cell phones and hotspots. So there was limited connection to the homes. So the sustainability funding will really help us we've invested in the infrastructure to continue to improve and build that. And so we have point-to-point wireless or point-to-multi-point wireless connections that we've connected our homes with. And I think that moving forward, as Godfrey said, it's not only maintaining the system. We hired some community members and trained them to install these wireless connections to the homes. And we brought 7 of them on as employees to continue to maintain the network. And so the tribe, fortunately, up to this point, has allocated the Treasury and the CARES Act dollars to help sustain us till now. But moving forward, looking at all the things that are put in place, we need to continue to maintain and grow the network and plus the capacity of our staff to continue to improve and maintain the network. We have over 512 homes connected now to internet. And so that's a critical piece I think that's missing, because now Windstream was the service provider in the area. Now we're trying to take over that and make our JemezNet the service provider of our region, so that's part of our sustainability, but it cannot support the entire network and what we want to be able to maintain.
Kevin, thank you. Next question, last question for Godfrey. So the digital divide still exists between broadband availability on tribal lands versus the rest of the United States, especially in rural tribal areas. Only about 10 tribally owned carriers out of 574 federally recognized Indian tribes receive universal service funding, of which a large component of that fund reimburses those companies for operating and maintaining their networks. How important is it for attendees here at the conference to let regulators in Washington, D.C. know how critical sustainability funding would be to finally close the digital divide in rural tribal areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, we're looking at so much funding coming out, but the piece that they left out was this piece of funding to help you maintain and operate their company. I get funding right now from USF, but I had to go through quite a bit of trial by fire to get there. Let me tell you, it was a big road. Rob was there with me trying to get this whole thing done regulatory wise. I decided to go under regulation and be able to, let's just say, follow the money. There's money there to be had for operational costs, and I followed it. I had to go to the FCC, which I did find out that they won't be here till tomorrow. So just to let you know, they are coming and they'll be here tomorrow. But these guys are the ones that helped me become part of a club called, getting ETC and ILEC status. It's a tough place to try to get, but I want each of these tribes to be able to go to get that fund. There's a fund called USF, Universal Service Funds. That fund has some $9 billion in it to be able to help provide services, but trying to forge that and figure out how do we do that for any country? How do we tap those funds to be able to run our companies, to be able to maintain that and be an essential service? This is not a luxury service anymore. This is essential service for tribal nations and their people. So they're trying to train their people. They're trying to have kids go to school using these services. So we need to do that, and we need to maintain that. Again, a lot of the building plans for building out these networks were never given to us. They just told us what we needed to do to get the money. And then once we get the money, then we apply it. We can admire this brand new truck that we just got, but how do we put it to work? How do we make it drive? We throw rocks in the back and throw it from one side of the reservation to the other, all these kind of things. I mean, make it work for us. So we need to get those gas money. We've got to learn how to run these companies. Giving us a driver's license, we got to learn how to do this. So that's my analogy of how to get this done. So hopefully we can get it going.
Awesome, Godfrey. Thank you. Last question for Kevin. So Kevin, please tell attendees, if you don't mind, what the average price of broadband service is within your community, and if sustainability funding would help get more members signed up and promote adoption.
Okay, when we hit the pandemic, what in the survey and the information we got from the community, the average price a home was paying for internet service was around $110 a month. And that was for 3 down, 1 up speed. And in some places, 2 down, 1 up. And our schools were also paying a lot. The highest, I think, was our BIE school, which was paying $2,600 a month. And they were promised 10.3, but actual speeds were, again, 3, 1.5. So what was promised was not being delivered, but the costs were very high. And so I think the other piece that, not only with the sustainability funding, is the marketing piece. Because when we set up our own tribal network, your community is not always going to trust that you're going to provide the best service as another company or carrier that has more promotional items, that has ads and such. And so I think that's another piece in the sustainability and helping to promote this is being able to sell what we've developed and being able to promote it so that we can switch over everyone. And when we initially did the survey and began setting up our homes, we asked them how many of you would switch over from Windstream, Verizon, whatever jetpack or you're using or your cell phone to connect to the internet to the tribal network. And so roughly half said they probably would, and the other half said maybe they'll consider it. But as we've been able to grow our efforts and by word of mouth and be able to show what we've been able to do, as I shared earlier, we have over 12 homes now connected. And so we're continuing to look at now reaching some of our tribal members that live just off the reservation. So I think looking at the sustainability funding and some of those opportunities that lie ahead of us, it would really help us to secure. But I think a big piece of that is really marketing what you have and the quality of it and what you built as part of that sustainability funding and growing your network. And we've also turned to Maddie and Godfrey, and they've also helped us to look at other avenues. And so I think with taking their lead, the Tribal Council in Jemez tribally chartered a corporation as JemezNet to begin to look at other opportunities and funding that we can secure and bring in to help sustain and maintain our network.
I have one question for Kevin. Yeah. Kevin, when you built this without any kind of sustainability funding right now, how do you keep the prices low enough for tribal members to be able to afford your service? Because right now, if we build these new networks and we don't have any kind of sustainability funding to help us, we want our customers to start paying for what it actually costs to provide those services. It could be upwards of $500 to $600 to $700 a month. What customer is going to pay that? So how do you keep those prices down?
At the moment, as I shared earlier, the tribe has invested the treasury dollars to help us keep the costs down at the moment. We've worked to move all our tribal programs from Windstream to our tribal corporation. And so those are the two strategies that we are working on now as we go out to secure more funds to sustain it. We're looking at the Affordable Connectivity Program, a lot of the subsidy programs that the FCC provides, Lifeline and all that, telehealth and some of those opportunities that are available to help bring the cost down and to support our members in being able to maintain their connection at a lower cost. So those are a few of the strategies that we're using currently, but we're always looking at what other opportunities are out there to secure more funds.
All right, guys. So that's all the questions I had for these guys. Are there any questions from attendees?
Can we turn on that mic? It's coming now.
Now you can. Oh, Kevin. Now it's test 1, 2. Okay, now we got the level. What's the current level of service you're providing per customer, and what's that cost? I didn't catch that.
25.3 at the moment through the point to multi-point wireless, and so that's an increase from what Windstream was providing, 3 down, 1.5 up.
And same price?
Actually, at the moment, because of the investment of the tribe with the Treasury Act dollars, we're currently not billing our families. So our goal is to put them on the ACP program and be able to start that moving forward. Because one of the provisions of setting up the wireless homes and trying to get all the homes to connect was that the tribe would support the connection to a certain point, and then we would bring in the billing. And so what we are estimating based on just the average cost was we want to stay around $85 a month for that connectivity, and then use the ACP program to help subsidize the costs that the homes are paying.
And last one, is there a plan to get up to what's considered broadband now, the 100 meg?
Yes, that's the goal. We want to ideally have fiber to the home, and we're planning for that, and hopefully that we can secure the resources to be able to provide that in the future. But again, we're continuing looking at ways to upgrade our network to increase the speeds and the reliability of our connections to all the homes.
Nice.
One more question about that. How long do you think you can maintain that? How long can a tribe actually keep putting in funding? Is there kind of an end date for that?
Yes, this is kind of our final year with the final allocation for this current fiscal year.
So, that's going to be a tough issue on trying to find different things. So hopefully NTTA can advocate to be able to recognize our leadership in Washington to address this issue of trying to get sustainably funding for tribes to be able to pull from and not being able to be a burden on the tribe itself. So,
Absolutely, Godfrey. Any other questions, guys?
Doug, I just got a comment on that since we brought up ACP a couple times, because it is an option for sustainability for tribes, and as we've seen, to help offset that cost. But Godfrey, I don't know if this is a good time to speak to the importance, of lobbying and advocating, going to DC and doing these things, and preparing everyone to know that that's part of your future, that the battles take place in DC over issues like this. And the ACP program itself wasn't funded in the same manner like Lifeline and just ongoing. They set a amount, several $1 billion, and as it's being used up, that fund is draining out, and it's set to end sometime next year. It's looking like September of 2024. So that is a great issue we need to advocate for in DC, is the continuance of this program. It offers $75 a month per tribal member as a discount on their broadband that they get directly. So it's costs that the members do not have to bear in order for the broadband. It helps the whole goal of getting connectivity, but it's going to expire if we don't do something. And so NTTA, it offers great opportunities to get out there, and Godfrey, I'm sure, would go with you hand in hand to get that done, because the message needs to be out there. We need to keep that program going.
great point. Thank you, Rob.
Yep. Sir.
cost of providing broadband service on tribal lands. Scary to be able to make that affordable. So I was wondering what other big ticket items within that $2,600, are there any ways of reducing it to make it a more sustainable service? Because clearly costs got to be taken out of that annual operating cost.
It's an excellent question. So the question is, basically the amount of OPEX that's attributable to a 2,600 per location per year wholesale cost, about $1,600 to $1,700 per year. How can you actually get that down to where maybe that's $1,200 or $800 or whatever? A couple of responses. Number one, like Rob said, you can look at the Affordable Connectivity Program as an offset. That doesn't affect the cost, but that does help offset that cost. So that's one option. Another thing is, and this comes to mind because there's ISPs in this room, and they're making it work. They have a good business model and good planning. I'm just guessing here, but if you went and you talked to any one of those ISP providers that actually have a network in place today that's offering broadband service, they're probably saying, hey, we're running with a skeleton crew. They could probably get beefed up and offer more affordable or better broadband, if they had a full staff. So that might be one thing that it's a sacrifice. Okay, so that's probably another answer. The other answer would be that when you get into, I lost my complete train of thought there. I had a whole train of thought there. Customers. So let's say, for example, that you're signing up customers, okay? And let's say you have 4,000 customers that you're signing up. It may be like, Kevin's example, there's about 500 or 600 on his reservation out of 4,000. If he had the staff, he could sign them up faster, quicker, better. So once again, I think a lot of it comes down to staffing, that if you're staffed up enough to provide affordable broadband service to more and more community members faster than you would without the current staff that you have, that would really help the cause. As far as getting down that 1,600, it probably has to do with labor benefits. There's probably benefits that maybe some of the costs they just can't offer, because otherwise they couldn't keep broadband service affordable. That's my take.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but we're at time, so time to move on.
Okay,
guys. I know we're trying to catch up, so we're trying to get things going. So Kevin, thank you so much. Hey, stop by, talk to Kevin when you get a chance. See him roaming around here, ask him about questions about how he's doing it right now. But like I said, funding's going to run out, so we got to try to find out different ways to do that for you. So thank you, Doug.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you.